I'm not going to go out there and objectively say, oh, Stephanie White's an awful coach for Caitlin Clark. But I do think there were some very fair points made in this. I still stand by Stephanie White likes the idea of Caitlin Clark more than she likes the player of Caitlin Clark. It's like you have got an extremely risk-averse coach and you've got an extreme risk taker.
On the surface, it's the feel-good story of the year. After years of being irrelevant, a forgotten franchise lost in the league's basement, the Indiana Fever finally clawed their way back into the playoffs. They did it on the back of a phenomenon.
Do you remember the interview she had when it was like, when she had just played her worst game ever as a pro? She played small forward and was fucking terrible. To play Caitlin off the ball, you need to have like a whole bunch of super high IQ players that are going to move the ball side to side and get the ball back to her.
A player who single-handedly rewrote the rules of attention and gravity in women's basketball. Every game became a spectacle. A sold-out arena buzzing with an energy the league had never seen before. Viewership records weren't just broken, they were obliterated. By every metric, this was a story of a meteoric rise, a franchise reborn. But if you looked closer, past the highlight reels and the roaring crowds, you could see the cracks. You could see it in the tense sideline exchanges, the frustrated glances that lingered a second too long. You could hear it in the whispers that the locker room, the one celebrated for its newfound success, wasn't nearly as unified as the official narrative claimed. And you could feel it in the undeniable friction between the team's generational superstar and its celebrated Coach of the Year winning leader. The success, it turns out, wasn't a cure for the team's problems, it was an amplifier. When a team is losing, friction is expected. It's a symptom of failure. But when a team starts winning, especially with a talent like Caitlin Clark, the expectation shifts. It's no longer just about winning, it's about dominating. It's about harmony. Suddenly, every questionable substitution, every moment of on-court frustration is no longer a simple growing pain. It's a potential crack in the foundation of a supposed dynasty. This raises a terrifying question. How can a team that looks so successful be rumored to be in a state of quiet chaos? And what happens when the architect of the rebuild and the face of the franchise are locked in a philosophical war for the team's very soul? When the Indiana Fever hired Stephanie White, it was hailed as a masterstroke. When they drafted Caitlin Clark, it was seen as destiny. The combination of the two was supposed to be unstoppable, a perfect fusion of experience and revolutionary talent designed to launch a new WNBA dynasty. On paper, it was flawless. First, you have the phenom. Caitlin Clark didn't just have a good rookie season. She had one of the most statistically dominant debut campaigns in the history of professional sports. She averaged a staggering 19.2 points, 8.4 assists, and 5.7 rebounds per game. She was the runaway Rookie of the Year, a first-team All-WNBA selection, and an All-Star. She shattered the league's single-season and single-game assist records, broke the all-time rookie scoring record, and became the first rookie in history to record a triple-double. Her performance wasn't just historic for a first-year player. One deep statistical analysis showed her rookie numbers matched or exceeded the career averages of established legends in their areas of strength. She was, without exaggeration, a once-in-a-generation talent. Then you have the architect. Stephanie White wasn't just any coach. She was a proven winner with an impeccable pedigree. As a player, she was a superstar in her own right, a legend at Purdue who won an NCAA championship and the Wade Trophy as the nation's top player. As a coach, her resume was just as sterling. She had extensive experience across the WNBA and the college ranks. In her first stint with the Fever back in 2015, she led the team to the WNBA Finals in her very first season, becoming the first rookie coach in league history to do so. More recently, she had just won WNBA Coach of the Year in 2023 after guiding the Connecticut Sun to a franchise record number of wins. Even Clark herself publicly praised White as one of the smartest basketball minds she'd ever been around. This was the perfect pairing. A coach who had been a dominant college star, who understood the pressure of being the one, tasked with mentoring the next dominant college star. But this shared history, the very thing that made them seem like a perfect match, also concealed a potential for a massive ego clash. This wasn't just a coach meeting a player, it was a meeting of two powerful, unshakable basketball identities, each with their own proven blueprint for victory. The stage was set not just for collaboration, but for a philosophical power struggle over whose vision would ultimately prevail. The conflict simmering within the Indiana Fever isn't born from personal animosity. It's a fundamental philosophical clash of basketball ideologies, a battle between a coach who believes in the system and a superstar who is the system. Stephanie White's entire coaching identity is built on a team-first foundation. Her public mantra is, "We over me," a philosophy she has consistently preached. She believes in unity, sacrifice, and the concept of players becoming stars in your role where everyone contributes to a larger cohesive whole. Her ideal offense is what she calls .5 basketball, a fluid system where players are encouraged to make a decision, shoot, pass, or drive within half a second of touching the ball to ensure constant movement and prevent predictability. She is by nature and by record a pragmatic, risk-averse coach who wants to build a machine with interchangeable, high-performing parts. Caitlin Clark is the antithesis of this philosophy. Her game has never been about fitting into a pre-existing machine. It's about bending the entire game to her will. She is a heliocentric force of nature, a player in the mold of Luka Doncic or James Harden, whose genius is unlocked by having the ball in her hands and the freedom to take immense risks. Her entire career has been built on a high-usage, high-risk, high-reward style of play. She thrives on controlling the tempo, surveying the entire floor, and making audacious passes that other players wouldn't even see, let alone attempt. To take the ball out of her hands is to neutralize her greatest weapon, her unparalleled court vision and basketball IQ. This creates an inevitable and profound impasse. White is trying to build a perfectly balanced, democratic offense. Clark's entire history proves that the team is at its absolute best when the offense is a monarchy, and she is the one on the throne. It's a collision of two valid yet diametrically opposed paths to winning. This philosophical divide erupted into a full-blown public controversy with one fateful coaching decision: the off-ball experiment. In a move that sent shockwaves through the fan base, Stephanie White announced a strategic shift to move Caitlin Clark out of her natural position as the primary ball handler, instead starting Aari McDonald at point guard to allow Clark to play more off the ball. Publicly, White's rationale was rooted in protection and preservation. The stated goal was to take some of the workload off Clark, to save her energy, and most importantly, to shield her from the relentless physical punishment she endured being guarded for 94 feet, possession after possession. Especially after Clark had already dealt with nagging injuries, the move was framed as a necessary adjustment to ensure her long-term health, but the backlash was immediate and severe. Fans and analysts alike decried the move as a fundamental misunderstanding of what makes Clark a generational talent. The results on the court were disastrous. The fever offense, which thrived on Clark's pace and vision, immediately stalled. Critics argued that by trying to protect Clark, White had actually made the entire team predictable and far easier to defend, effectively handing their opponents the game plan on a silver platter. Even Clark herself seemed, at best, unenthusiastic about the change. In public comments, she carefully but clearly reiterated that she is at her most effective with the ball in her hands, especially in transition, where she can dictate the flow of the game. The experiment was quickly labeled a coaching disaster, a failed tactic that did little more than expose the team's inability to generate open looks for its best player when she wasn't creating them herself. This wasn't just a tactical error, it was a public declaration. The decision to move Clark off the ball, even with the best of intentions, sent a clear message: the coach was committed to implementing her system, even if it meant fundamentally altering the game of her superstar player. It suggested a belief that for the Fever to achieve sustainable success, Clark needed to be reshaped to fit White's mold, rather than the system being reshaped to fit Clark's transcendent talent. For many, this was the first tangible piece of evidence that the coach wasn't building around her star. She was trying to break her down and rebuild her into something else entirely. The on-court strategic disagreements are only one part of the story. The other, more explosive element is the persistent rumor that the Fever locker room is a hotbed of tension and dysfunction, the chaos that threatens to derail the entire project. These whispers are not new. Even before the current storm, there were signs of trouble. During the 2024 season, there was significant commentary about potential locker room issues, partly fueled by the visible discontent of former forward Nalissa Smith with her role on the team. The drama surrounding the sudden exit of veteran DeWanna Bonner in 2025 only added more fuel to the fire, suggesting a pattern of instability. A significant source of this tension appears to be a poorly constructed roster that creates strategic friction. The team is heavy on players like Brianna Turner and Natasha Howard, who are not perimeter threats, leading to a clogged paint that directly suffocates Clark's ability to drive, create, and run the pick and roll. This creates a bizarre dynamic where teammates, simply by playing their natural game, are inadvertently sabotaging the team's offensive engine. This structural flaw inevitably leads to on-court frustration that can easily be misinterpreted as personal animosity. The narrative of a divided locker room was further amplified by controversial personnel decisions, such as the signing of Breonna Turner, a player who had previously made anti-Clark posts on social media. While such online history can be overblown in an environment already under a microscope, it fed the perception that the locker room was not a welcoming place for its new superstar. Of course, the team has vehemently pushed back against this narrative. Key players like Aaliyah Boston and Sophie Cunningham have been forceful in their public denials of any internal chaos. They insist the team is professional, communicates through any disagreements, and that what the public perceives as bad body language is often just the misinterpreted frustration of intense competitors. In a particularly telling statement, Boston issued a guarantee, stating that the team is so professional that if there were a real problem, you would never know, because that's none of your business. This defense suggests that the chaos is not the overt, dramatic infighting that many imagine, but a more subtle, corrosive tension born from the constant stress of incompatible playing styles and ill-fitting roles. For those looking for evidence of the conflict, the visual cues are impossible to ignore. The tension between coach and star, and between star and teammates, has repeatedly spilled out into the open during games, creating viral moments that have defined the narrative around this team. The most infamous example is the clip of Caitlin Clark, wide open on the three-point line, throwing her arms up in visible frustration not once but twice, as teammate Natasha Howard opted to drive into a crowded paint instead of passing her the ball. The moment was dissected endlessly online, with many interpreting it as a clear sign of a broken offense and a complete lack of trust between teammates. This is compounded by observations of the dynamic between Clark and her coach. Critics have pointed out that during Clark's signature hot streaks, where she drains multiple threes in a row, Coach White can often be seen on the sideline with her arms crossed, her expression unreadable, in stark contrast to her more animated celebrations for other players' successes. While this could mean anything, in the context of the existing rumors, it's read as a sign of disapproval or detachment. The narrative is further fueled by reports and video titles alleging heated arguments between Clark and White during timeouts and on the sideline. While the exact content of these exchanges remains speculative, the perception of public, emotional clashes adds a powerful visual to the story of their philosophical divide. Perhaps most telling was an interview with Sue Bird, where Clark appeared visibly nervous, carefully parsing her words as if walking a tightrope, terrified of saying something she shouldn't about her coaching situation. For many, her cautious demeanor spoke volumes, revealing a tension she was desperately trying to keep under wraps. What was once celebrated in college as Clark's fiery passion and competitive spirit is now being systematically reframed in the professional ranks. Her expressive on-court demeanor is no longer seen as leadership. It's labeled as bad body language and evidence of dissent. When she shows frustration, she's no longer a young leader demanding excellence. She's a rookie showing up her veteran teammates and undermining her coach. This puts her in an impossible position. If she contains her emotions, she's not being the authentic, fiery player that made her a star. If she lets them show, she feeds the very media narrative that threatens to consume her team. As the narrative of conflict has intensified, Stephanie White has engaged in a masterful public relations campaign, positioning herself not as a rigid ideologue clashing with her star, but as a fierce protector shielding her from a predatory world. Her public comments on Clark are a masterclass in narrative control. The cornerstone of this defense is her now famous Taylor Swift 2.0 inches comparison. White has repeatedly stated that Clark's level of fame is akin to a global pop star, explaining that her name has become clickbait and is constantly thrown into a lot of conversations that have absolutely nothing to do with her. Building on this, she made the powerful claim that she hates it for Caitlin, and that she views her 23-year-old star as a pawn in a lot of other people's games, and a lot of other people's narratives. On the surface, these are incredibly supportive statements. White is publicly acknowledging the unprecedented madness surrounding Clark and framing herself as a mentor defending her young player from the immense pressures of the media, league politics, and public expectation. She is, in effect, building a wall around her star. However, there is a more cynical interpretation of these comments. By relentlessly focusing on the external pressures facing Clark, White skillfully diverts attention from the internal conflicts over offensive strategy, roster fit, and locker room chemistry. It's a strategic deflection. Every sign of trouble, every frustrated glance, Every questionable loss can be blamed on the outside noise rather than on her own coaching decisions. The pawn comment in particular is a multi-layered piece of rhetoric. It simultaneously defends Clark from her critics, takes a subtle shot at WNBA leadership by implying they are part of the game being played, and most importantly reinforces her own authority. If Clark is a vulnerable pawn being manipulated by outside forces, then she desperately needs a strong, wise, experienced figure to guide and protect her. And who is that figure? Her coach, Stephanie White. In one fell swoop, White reframes the entire dynamic, shifting her public image from the coach who is clashing with her star to the veteran mentor protecting her young charge from a hostile world. The situation in Indiana is one of the most fascinating and high-stakes dramas in modern sports. It boils down to a single, intractable dilemma. What happens when a generational talent who is a system collides with a coach of the year who believes devoutly in her system? On one side, you have Caitlin Clark, a player whose unique genius is predicated on freedom, risk, and control. On the other, you have Stephanie White, a proven winner whose philosophy is built on structure, sacrifice, and a team-first ethos. The evidence of their philosophical clash is everywhere in the disastrous off-ball experiment that seemed to fundamentally misunderstand Clark's strengths, in the persistent whispers of a locker room struggling with strategic incompatibility, in the viral moments of on-court frustration and tense sideline body language, and in the coach's carefully crafted public statements that both protect and perhaps deflect. The stakes could not be higher. This isn't just about the Indiana Fever's chances at a championship. The success or failure of the most popular and marketable player the WNBA has ever seen has profound implications for the entire league's trajectory and growth. A messy public divorce between Clark and the Fever would be a catastrophic setback. This leaves us with the ultimate question. Is this friction simply the necessary, painful process of forging a true championship contender, with a veteran coach molding a young superstar into a more complete and versatile player? Or is this a ticking time bomb, a fundamental incompatibility that will only fester until it results in a trade demand that blows up the most promising project in the WNBA? The future of a franchise, and perhaps a league, hangs in the balance, caught between the irresistible force of a generational talent and the immovable object of a coach who refuses to bend.